Thank you, Bob. So this year, on January 12th, as the odds makers were setting the line between Ohio State and Oregon, nobody was picking Ohio State to win the national championship. The Ducks were too speedy, too clever, too fast. And on top of that, they lost not one, but two starting quarterbacks to injury. And they were forced to start their third stringer. So, I ask you one question. How do you get the players on your team, in the face of that adversity, to come together and truly believe that you're the best damn football team in all of college football? The answer is you turn to your secret weapon, of course. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage CEO of Focus 3, Brian Kight.
All right. I couldn't help but take a couple notes when listening to those first couple presenters, and I got a little fired up myself. I was about ready to jump up on this stage. So I appreciate your guys' time. Just a show of hands, how many of you were here for last year's session? How many of you were here? And how many of you were not here for last year's session? Pretty much everybody who didn't have their hands up the first time. Is that how it works? Okay. So one, I am so grateful to be back here with you guys again at this event. Had so much fun last year, and it's just it's an honor that you guys would ask me to come back and address you again. And so we're going to relay a little bit of what we talked about last year, and we're gonna filter this. We're gonna layer some of what we talked about in terms of running a high-performance organization. Except this time, what we're really going to zero in on is we're really going to zero in on the behavior piece. We're really going to zero in on how do you get and build exceptional behavior in people. And I'm going to, and it's a little bit dangerous perhaps because of this audience talking about the word talent, but I'm going to push a little bit back on this word talent, just a little bit. Because like all good things in business and HR, we use the words until we bludgeon ourselves to death with that word. And then everybody, that word now is the universal claim to uniqueness until it has no meaning left whatsoever. And we're very, very close to that with the word talent. Because everybody is saying it. Everybody is mentioning it. It's the search for talent, building talent, hiring talent, developing talent, cultivating talent, teaching talent. You can't teach talent. You have it or you don't. All of these different things. And we don't have clarity on what it is that is the most important piece, and that is what are we doing with our talent? What are we doing with our talent? And to use this sports analogy, pick a sport, pick a level, pick a team. Whether it's the A team, B team, that Bob was running into the ground in the offseason. I played on those sports teams. I know what that's like. I used the real hammers, Bob, for what it was worth. I had the big sledgehammers, obviously because I am a massive individual. That is my... I played college football, which obviously you guys know that from just my physique. Why are you guys laughing at that? It's not... Now, I played college football here, actually, in Worcester. Grew up in Southern California. For those of you that remember, I did what every Southern California kid dreams of, move out to the Midwest, to Worcester. I can remember when my dad moved me in. I can remember this vividly. It's fun being back here. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now after living in Ohio for 15 years. But I can remember when my dad helped me move into my dorm room at Worcester, and there was an Amish cart and family riding down the street, like on the road. And they had the full get-up. They had the beard. They had the curls, the sideburns, they had the hats, they had the mom and the daughters with the bonnets and everything. I can remember looking at my dad and I said, "Hey Dad, look, there's a Renaissance fair in town. How cool is that?" It was not a Renaissance fair. I learned that very quickly. But pick a sports team, right? Whether it's college, whether it's professional, whether it's the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Indians, the Reds, the Buckeyes, the Ducks, Alabama. Who has more talent? Do you need talent to be successful? Do you need talent to win? Of course you do. But pick a team. Does the most talented team win? Is that ever the case? No. Sometimes the talented team wins when they can tap into and do exceptional things with that talent, but sports are such a great incubator for what it is that applies to our business, and that is the best talent doesn't always win. You don't need the best talent. You need the people who are willing to do the best things. If that happens to align with the best talent, well, now you're going to separate yourself. But it's not about just getting the talent, finding the talent, or mining the talent. It's about what we're doing with the talent. Is that fair? Is that a fair request for us to look at? Okay, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And our time is limited, and I don't want to go over. They said I have to be finished by 1:30 this afternoon, so I don't want to go over, so I want to get right to it. We're not doing lunch, by the way. No. Kidding, no. We just have about 40 minutes or so. So I'm going to walk through the R Factor. You have handouts on your table with the R Factor. It's just an extended overview. Most of what I address here today is going to be in that document. Some of it will not be, but this will be a somewhat abbreviated version, but it will give us and give you some guiding direction on how do you get exceptional talent. And I'll make this point known. I don't know how hard you all want to be coached and pushed today, but here's where I'm going to go, and then you guys figure out where you want to be. I'm going to coach and push to exceptional. To Bob's point, if there's a 1 on that list, why can't we be there? And if in the pursuit of being number 1, we get to number 5, great. And then we take another stab at it, take another swing at it. I got to keep with the sports analogy. I don't know what sport you stab in, jousting, or I don't know. Swing, baseball, swing. You know, we'll take another snap, we'll take another swing at it, but let's coach to exceptional. Let's not build good businesses. Let's not even build great businesses. Let's build exceptional businesses, and let's build exceptional people in the process to help them build it for us and with us, okay? So is this is not advancing, just for whatever it's worth. So we can jump in. Okay, so that is me, but I am also right here, so we don't need that. What is important on that is my Twitter handle. I am in a vicious battle with my dad and partner, founder of our company. He is about 1,000 Twitter followers ahead of me. I think that's just because he's closer friends with Urban than I am, frankly. But if you have like 1,000 friends, we can fix this real fast, okay? All right. So I want to jump right away. Oh, by the way, I got married a month ago today. So it's kind of this 1 month ago today was my first day as a married man. I will say this is, you know, the ladies like to see the pretty flowers and the beach and all that different stuff. But if we go to the next slide, here's what the guys want to know. I didn't have to wear a tie and I didn't have to wear shoes. So I feel like I got the good end of that bargain. Also, I got her. That's the big one. So, okay. So what we're going to talk about today is something called the performance pathway. And we're going to really zero in on the behavior piece of this performance pathway. But some of you might remember this from last year. But we'll recap on it because hearing it one time doesn't mean that we even remember it, doesn't necessarily mean that we understand it, and it certainly does not mean that we are skillful in how we apply it into our businesses and our organizations. Here's what the performance pathway represents. It represents the physics of how all performance inside of a business, an organization, or a team operate. And Bob said it earlier, culture trumps strategy. And he's right. You might have heard the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast or eats it for lunch, it eats it for a meal of some kind. The point is that when culture and strategy compete for people's mindsets, when it competes for what are people going to do, their behavior, which of those two things wins? In your organization, when culture and strategy are competing for the mindset and behavior of people, which wins? Culture wins. Culture wins. So we need a plan. We need a system. And the speed of things happening today, we have to have a system, not just some concept that can fade away when we get under stress and pressure. So here's what the performance pathway reflects. It reflects this truth and physics of performance, and that is that leaders create culture, culture drives behavior, and behavior produces results. If we reverse engineer that, and we look at it from the results side back, all results are a reflection of the behavior of people. Agreed? The results we get reflect how we are behaving. Sales, service, operations, etc. All of the details that we engage in, all the stuff that makes our business go, right? Going back to what Pam was talking about, people are our most important asset. But let's drill down on that. What about people? Have you ever had people that were not an important asset to your success in your business? Yeah, and you needed to get them out real fast because they were holding you back. Why is that? Well, they were still a person, but they were giving you not the behavior that you needed to produce the results you want. So it's the behavior of people that is the most important asset is what we're going after. I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of really good people I would never hire for my business. Do you know anyone like that? Really good people that you would not work with. I do. Why? Well, because I'll go to happy hour with you, but you're not going to produce results in the business. You're not set for the role. Your behavior isn't quite skilled enough. We're not at that spot. We're not at that area where you're going to be able to go out and perform at the level I need you to perform at inside of our business. And that doesn't make you less of a good person or less of a friend. It simply means that your behavior does not produce results. So if you're going to work here, you've got to have the behavior that produces results we're looking for. Now here's where the gold is. Here's where the mythical silver bullet that doesn't exist in our businesses, here's where it is. What drives how and why we behave the way we do every single day? And a hint, it's an open screen test. It's culture. It is not strategy. It is not process. It is not motivation. Right? It is culture. Because what is culture? And we talked about this last year, well, just to refresh our minds. What's culture? Well, culture is three things. Culture is the beliefs that drive behavior and the experience people have with your company. That's what culture is. It's three things. It's belief, behavior, and experience. So what is it we have to do with culture? We have to lead it. What are the terms with culture when you're doing, what are the activities around culture? Leading culture, changing culture, building culture, adjusting culture, clarifying our culture, right? Look what we're trying to lead, change, adjust, and clarify. Beliefs, behaviors, and experiences. Have you ever tried to change someone's beliefs? How did that work out for you? Have you ever tried to change someone's behavior? Right? In the order of the hardest things in the world to do, it is rocket science, brain surgery, and behavior change. Right? Or as our former president would say, rocket surgery and then behavior change. Some of you will figure out that joke later, and the president I was referring to. I can't mention presidents. We assisted obviously Ohio State being back in Ohio. It's nice because being a part of that journey with Ohio State was incredible. And whenever you achieve something like that, as a natural competitor, I always want to go to the next level. And I always feel like, what's the next thing above that? You win a college football national championship. I didn't win it. You helped. Right, a small piece of that. What's the next thing? And I think about pro ranks, and in Ohio, and I was like, okay. So I start setting the bar higher. I just decided the two goals over the next 2 years were to see if I could find a way to help bring a championship to Cleveland, and see if I could get Bob Klonk to vote Democrat. Those are the next two things. One of them is going to be possible. The other is going to be a struggle. We'll see which one you get to pick. But culture, it's belief, behavior, and experience. That's what it is. So look what we're leading. We have to lead belief systems. We have to change belief systems. Not like, those kinds of beliefs, right? But what do we believe about how work gets done? We have to change the way people behave, which is incredibly hard. We have to change and shift the experience that people get from us as leaders and the experience we are giving to each other inside of our businesses. And it's leaders that create that culture by means of what you measure, by means of what you pay attention to, by means of how you converse and how you interact. And I love what was said earlier about the feedback in 360s. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. There was a couple absolutely golden notions inside what we were talking about. But it's about conversations. And we do these big surveys with organizations. And one of the questions in the surveys that we put is, our performance review system helps me perform my job better. And over the tens, maybe now hundreds of thousands of people we've surveyed, I'm not sure anyone has ever scored that above a 3 out of 5 in any company we've ever been around. Because what's the typical performance review system? Typical performance review system happens how many times a year? Once. And in between that, and what happens when that? They get the feedback, and it's always funny too, if we actually kind of dive into it and we're honest with ourselves. People kind of act shocked a little bit if it's not so good, but secretly they know. They're like, I knew this was coming, but I have to act surprised. Why? Because my leader or manager has not talked to me about this. We haven't laid this. We haven't had those frank conversations. The culture is one of avoiding the conversation, not one of having the conversation. So I love this feedback notion of we're not going to do performance reviews. As a leader and a manager, it's your responsibility to talk to the people you lead every day, every week, every month about exactly where they are performing today. That's culture. Because it shows I'm paying attention and there's a standard that has to be upheld. And I'm not going to let 364 days go by before we're going to talk about that standard. We're going to talk about it every day. And there's a couple really interesting companies doing some fascinating things with that. Unfortunately, just don't have time to talk with today. And there's one other important piece on the slide, and that is the 2 orange arrows. Because leaders create culture, and culture drives behavior of people. And as people start to behave a certain way in alignment with the culture, other people inside the organization see and feel the behavior of people, and it informs them about the culture. And what that would look like is this. I would get hired at any one of your companies and go through some form of an onboarding process, whether it was an hour or whether it was a week or however long it would be. And then maybe there'd be kind of a ride-along, whatever it would be. I'm thinking of Kevin Hart and Ice Cube, the movie. I don't know why. I've never even seen the movie. But yeah, I'd go through some process, and then I would ultimately finish my onboarding process, and I would come and I would be a part of a team. And in the onboarding process, all of the things happen. Our rules, our procedures. I would have our culture explained to me, the values, etc. And then I would get done, and I would go to the team, and what would be the first thing that team would say to me? Hey, how was the onboarding process? Great. Let me tell you how it really works around here. Culture. And now I'm not learning it from my leader, I'm learning it from my team, and that's those orange arrows at work. So what happens if you have a slightly resistant culture that drives slightly resistant behavior that reinforces that resistance into the culture? What happens to what those arrows are doing to performance? It's a hindrance. And to a high degree, it can become a doom loop, where we're putting all of our strategic and process and technology and new hire and talent initiatives into a culture behavior flywheel that is chewing it up. And maybe you've worked in an organization that has had that issue before. But what happens if we get it right? What happens if you get an exceptional culture, highly intentional, highly skilled people, open and willing to give and receive feedback, change, learn, grow, collaborate, team, do all this high-level stuff that we talk about, but it drives that behavior specifically. What happens to those orange arrows? They become performance accelerators, where you get more than the sum of your parts. And I'll just call it point blank. That is exactly what happened at Ohio State this past season. There is no conceivable way that the guy who was holding the clipboard for the guy who was holding the clipboard should win a national championship. And I'll go on record. We will never see that again. We will never see a third string win a national championship on his first starts ever. He'd never started a game at Ohio State, hadn't started a game of football in almost 4 years, hadn't started a football game. If you know his journey. Why? How did that happen? And as opposed to other positions, how many quarterback positions are allowed to be on the field at one time? Just one guy. And so even for running back, they can have 2 of them. They can be buddies. Hey, we can both be successful here. Offensive line, multiple. Corners, multiple. Safeties, multiple. Offensive, defensive line, multiple. Everybody else in the field. There's plenty for everybody. We can have some friends and buddies. For quarterbacks, there's only one. And when one went down, the other one stepped in. And all he did was break every record the previous quarterback had set up. That's all he had done. And then when the third guy went down, he stepped up. And as a unit, what they were was they were like this. They're like brothers. And it was not by accident. Not by accident at all. It was because that was the exact culture they had built, and they had been trained for that exact moment. That's what people see as, wow, look at, it's amazing what he did. Wow, what a surprise J.T. Barrett was as a quarterback for Ohio State when he stepped in for Braxton. Not a surprise at all. Not even close. The first time we started working at Ohio State almost 3 years ago, the only player who was a freshman at the time who walked up, shook our hands, and asked us if he could sit in on our sessions was J.T. Barrett from day one. Shook a hand and says, my name is JT. I'm from Wichita Falls, Texas. I'd love to sit in on the sessions because I'm going to be a quarterback. I'm going to learn for a couple years, and I'm going to have my opportunity later, but I want to start now. It was not my call, as you can imagine. I asked if it was okay. So he came in and sat. He was the only freshman they let in. So when he got his call, you can imagine sitting back. I knew he was ready. It wasn't my job to get him physically ready, but it was our job, leadership and culturally, to have him ready. But the most important thing that I knew and understood, and we knew and understood, was that the team was ready to follow him. The culture was ready to do whatever was necessary. And they built this next man up into their culture. And they built it all by design. And then the same thing with Cardale. And they took very different paths and very different journeys, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Okay? So, for today's purposes, we're going to zero in on the behavior piece of this performance pathway. And that is we're going to talk about the R factor, which is the behavioral system and the behavioral toolbox for how to take ownership of the one thing that you control. Okay? Are we just a little, just a delay on this? Are you guys reading my green, just so we're good? Okay, awesome, thank you. So I want to talk about the R factor, and a couple things about this before we jump into it. If we could advance to the next slide. A couple things to jump into this is I want to talk about these 4 levels of skill, because we're not going to be able to get to this discipline in the R factor today in the brief time that we have. But I do want to talk about these 4 levels of skill because they apply to us, they apply to you, they apply to your people who are not here, and it has the power to significantly impact and change your organization. So a number of different research studies from a scientific perspective, from a management perspective, have been done over the last 15 and 20 years, studying how we learn as people. And what has been uncovered in brain science over the last decade has been absolutely amazing. But here's what was found out. They wanted to study how does the average professional learn over a roughly 10-year window of time in their career. And once they get into a role, how much skill do they develop once they're in a role? Once they become somewhat established, if you will, how much skill do we grow over the course of 10 years? And what every study has found across every industry, across every culture, geographically, across every different level, has found that the average professional, once established in a role, builds 0 skill over a decade window of time. Here's specifically what they've found from a couple technical areas. They have found that technicians and physicians reading x-rays, MRIs, mammograms, these kinds of things, after 10 years performing in the role, they are consistently outperformed by a measurable margin of people who were trained in the last year. 10 years of experience being outperformed by people who have been trained and have 1 year of experience. How's that possible? This is what, in all of these different places, they're finding this out. They're like, how is this possible how is this possible with our pilots? How is it possible with our physicians? How is it possible with our CEOs and, cellists and soccer players? All these different areas, they're finding this out. And so here's what they found. They started researching what separates people. And we put it into these 4 categories, and just to help us understand in 4 levels of skill: beginning, basic, automatic, and exceptional. Beginning is when we're just starting out on a skill, not very good at it, very clumsy. Raise your hand if you can drive a stick shift today. Right, you remember the first time you ever tried that? Right? Or just remember the first time any of us you ever drove a car, period. Stick shift, a little more technical, higher degree of skill, right? That first time you ever drove a car, go back to that time. For some of you, it was an illegal act. For some of you, it was a legal act. But go back to that first time you ever drove a car. What was happening in your awareness? It was way up, right? And we're kind of, if you're like me, you're like trying to steer it between the lines, and that stuff's happening, and you're super tuned in. Well, just time and experience will take you to basic. Just keep driving like most of us have. You get from beginning to basic, and you can perform pretty well. If you're a stick shift, you can get out of first most of the time now, right? You can be pretty good. Maybe second's a little tricky, but once we're in third, we're good, unless we're on a hill or a freeway or things are going too fast or it's stop and go traffic. We just get to basic. But if the complexity or speed increases, our skill goes away very fast. And then time and experience just keep going will get us to automatic, which is where most of us drive today. And what automatic skill is characterized by is the ability to consistently produce a result without significant energy being expended to get it. Being able to consistently produce a good result without significant energy expended to get it. And we've all had and have a visceral experience of being an automatic, and that is this. Raise your hand if you have ever had the experience of driving to work or driving home, parking your car, and you cannot remember the drive. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever been driving and you couldn't remember like the last 5 minutes while you're still driving. Okay, right? And it's kind of scary a little bit. Because think about it, you're driving a 2,000-pound missile and we can't even remember it. Well, the reason this happens is because what the brain wants to do for more routine, consistent tasks, even complex ones, even very complex ones, what it wants to do is it wants to take the familiar ones and it wants to redirect them to a place that chews up less brain energy so that the brain has more energy to devote to really important stuff. Like when we're driving, flipping people off, texting, drum on the dashboard, whatever it is that we want to do. But this is why we drive mindlessly. This is why we drive literally a lot of times on autopilot. And I'm just thinking of that person, that law case of the person in the RV who didn't understand that cruise control did not mean autopilot. That's why if you look in an RV manual now, it will say cruise control is not autopilot. There must be a driver at all times. That's why you will see that. But here's what the research is finding. That what gets people to automatic will never get them to exceptional. What gets people to be able to produce a good result without significant energy will never get them to exceptional. Well, they started studying this. After they found out that people weren't building skill, it surprised them. They wanted to find out what were the big differentiators of people who were exceptional skill. What did they have that other people didn't? And what do you think was the number one thing that they thought the most exceptional people had that everybody else had less of? What do you think that was? Hint, it's a word we've talked about a whole lot this morning already. Starts with T and ends with talent. Okay? They anticipated to find that the most exceptional performers in all of the fields would be the what? Most. And guess what? They were absolutely wrong. In every field, the best performers were very rarely the most talented people. And in fact, they uncovered an inverse ratio, talent to performance. They found out the more talent someone had, the higher percentage chance they were to be in automatic. The most talented individuals were the most susceptible and the likeliest to get into automatic and never leave. Why would that be? Think about kids. Think about your talents. Think about young people. How long does a really talented person spend in the beginning stages of skill? A lot or a little? A little. How long do they spend in the basic stage? A little. How quickly do they get to automatic? Pretty quick. How about comparatively to everybody else? Ahead of or behind most people? Ahead of. So they don't spend a whole lot of time in the early stages of skill building. They get to produce a good result real fast because of their talent. They do it better and faster than everybody else. So what have they learned is the source of their success? It must be my talent. It must be what gets me where I want to go is the stuff that comes naturally to me. Therefore, if it doesn't come naturally and it doesn't feel good, it must not be good for me. And we commit to our talent, we reinforce our talent, and we don't get off of it. We resist stuff that we're unfamiliar with. We resist stuff that we're uncomfortable with. We resist skills. They don't come naturally. And we say stuff like, oh, I'm just not an emotional person. I'm just not a math person. I'm just not a music person. I'm just not I'm not a talker. I'm not a communicator. I'm not a salesperson. We say these things that get embedded into our culture and our mindset. And all it really is saying is that it just doesn't come naturally and I'm not naturally talented at that. Well, the most exceptional people have learned that's irrelevant. We can build the skill. So number one was talent. Number two was experience. The more experience someone had, the likelier they were to get stuck and caught in automatic. And that is this, because experience always builds habit. It does not always build skill. In the coaching world and in the sports world, there are far more coaches who are hovering around career 500 with 0 championships than there are coaches who are consistently championship coaches. And just go try to talk to one of those coaches and tell him or her how to be a better coach. Good luck with that. How many of you have kids that are teenage or grade school playing sports right now? You ever had or have had, right? You ever tried to have conversations with their coaches? It doesn't go real well. Doesn't go real well at all, because the hardest profession in the world to coach is coaches. Sometimes we have a little fun with them. We say, what do you use to coach your athletes? You ever film them? They go, yeah. I say, you got to watch the game tape? Yeah. You sit down with them with the game tape and point out so they can see it? Why? Why do you do that? And they say, well, so they can see themselves and we can look and address it and identify it together. I said, could you do your job without that game film? And they go, no, not a chance. I said, great. That's why I want to film you, and then we're going to sit down and watch your game tape. And they go, no, that's not a good idea. We're going to stay away from that. And then we almost get fired, so we don't do that. But it is interesting. It's fascinating. And you think about us. Think about us. What happens, and by the way, I wrote this note down, just so we're all clear. You guys remember what, it was Pam who was on the phone earlier, right? You guys remember what Pam said about the 360-degree feedback? Anybody write down what she said? What does she say about 360-degree feedback and why she said we're going away from it? She's worked here for how many years? 9. What does she say she's heard over the 9 years? What did she say she's heard? Same thing about the same for how many years? She said it. It's the same comments every year on the same people. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not immune to autopilot. Really good people, just on automatic. Okay? So, what do we do? How do we do this? The first thing is you have to understand there's 2 realities that drive and shape the performance of every organization. And that is that job skills rise no higher than life skills. And number 2 is that personal breakthroughs drive organizational breakthroughs. But let me go back one slide and just talk about this one for a minute. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this, but I do appreciate it being in this room. Every person who works for your company brings 2 skill sets to work every day. They bring job skills, which is their technical knowledge, technical capacity, and they also bring life skills. And life skills are their personal effectiveness. What we mean by a life skill are skills that matter everywhere, not just on the job. Things like resilience, patience, discipline, empathy, communication, listening, clarity, managing their emotions, self-awareness, situational awareness, thinking skills, management under stress, all of these things, right? And the relationship between these is that life skills are what drive and allow us to apply our job skills to the highest degree. How many people have to be in a bad mood to make it a hard day at the office? Just one person. Have you ever had to work with somebody who is technically really, really smart, maybe even a subject matter expert, but was a pain in the ass to work with? Okay, do me a favor, do not look at that person right now. You did it, I saw it. There's always one person, I say that and they go, and then there's 2 other people going, and then the person goes, I don't know. And I'm like, you're talking about someone, I know you are. But we've all experienced it. The more direct question is, have you ever been that person? That one is a little less comfortable. But here's the point for all of us. Where do we spend the overwhelming majority of time and focus and specifics and technique and application? Which of those 2 skill sets do we spend an overabundance of time training, practicing, studying, researching, and trying to apply? The job skills. And how many life skills have to get mismanaged to make it really hard to apply technical information? Just one. Show me a person who doesn't listen very well. And let's watch how much his technical knowledge gets applied. Show me a person who doesn't have patience. And let's watch how she performs on a team that has to perform together. And we ask this question very directly. Are you working as hard and as specifically on your life skills as you are on your job skills? There are 2 ways to piss me off. Number 1, call me a motivational speaker. I'm not here to motivate you. If you aren't motivated, good luck. If you get motivated here, fantastic, but I'm here to build skill. The second way is call those soft skills. There is nothing soft about them. They are the hardest skills in the world to build, and they drive hard numbers. It's not about talent. It's about skill. You give me a talented team, you give me a skilled team. I will bet my skilled team against the talented team every single time. Now, what happens when you marry talent and skill together? What happens when you get talented people who are committed to getting off of automatic and going to exceptional to build their own skill? What happens then? That's when you get something truly extraordinary. That's when you get something genuinely special. So we have to build both of these skill sets and not get caught overemphasizing the job skill piece, which is absolutely critical and fundamental. But we have to understand, what is it that makes job skills come alive? It's people who have the life skills to be able to go execute them in complex teaming environments and something that's constantly changing. Can we learn? And then the second piece is that personal breakthroughs drive organizational breakthroughs. There really is no such thing as organizational change. There's only personal change on a mass level. Companies change when people change. If people don't change, then the company doesn't change. There's just, it's right there. And we talk about this, right? We go back, people are our most important asset, which means if we're not changing with the times, if we're not adjusting ourselves, if we're not building learning organizations, we are going to struggle to achieve those organizational changes or breakthroughs or growth if we're not learning individually first, right? And what that simply means is this. We use this analogy of 20 square feet. Everybody in a company owns 20 square feet of your organization. And inside their 20 square feet, they and only they have control over the culture and the strategy, specifically their beliefs and their behavior. They own it. 20 is just an analogy, by the way. Don't get confused. Like 10 seemed like too few, 30 was too much, right? 20 was like the number. Sometimes there's a person who says, well, I've got like 400 square feet. I'm pretty important around here. Literally, I know we're here with HR. Just fire that person, okay? Just be done with it. But 20 square feet is just an analogy for your sphere of control. And here's how culture is built. Since we're talking about this and we're laying it out, let's just be very, very direct and straight up about this. Culture is built 20 square feet at a time. It's the only way culture is built. Culture is not built from the top down. It is built from the bottom up. Now, to follow, we have to know what kind of culture we're trying to align with. So if you let people build it from the bottom up with no direction, we let the inmates run the asylum, and people will create a culture of, I feel like I deserve a 200% pay raise, to our point earlier. But we need to give some clarity. But what matters is not the culture that's declared. It's what matters is the culture that is lived in the 20 square feet up. We talk about employee engagement, and I know you're going to hear more about that. But my view and perspective on employee engagement is that employee engagement is when a person feels equipped to own their 20 square feet in alignment with the culture and in alignment with the strategy, and they have the autonomy to own that 20 square feet. That's what employee engagement is. Give me the tools and the autonomy to execute my 20 square feet of the business that you gave to me, to go execute it to the best of my ability, with aligned beliefs, with aligned behavior. Because you think about that, how powerful is it when a person is acting from commitment to purpose? How powerful is that? It's almost the most powerful thing in the planet. Almost the most powerful thing in the world. There's only one thing stronger than a person acting from commitment to purpose, and that is a group of people acting from commitment to a shared purpose. That's what every team is trying to create. That's what every organization is trying to create. That's what you are trying to create, a group of people acting from commitment to a shared purpose, knowing that all you can do is own your 20 square feet. But if we're a team right here, the 5 of us are a team, what happens when I take ownership of my 20 square feet? You can't control mine, and I can't control yours. But what happens when I take ownership for mine? What's that show you? It shows you, I've got this. And what's that help you do? Helps you own yours. And I have influence, but I don't have control. Well, what happens if I don't own my 20 square feet? What happens if I rent it when it's convenient? What happens if I'm leasing it and I just stop paying? What happens if I look and I'm like, I start complaining about the culture in our department. I start complaining about the culture of the company. And I don't like this, and I don't like that. We call it BCD, blame, complain, defend. And I start doing BCD. What's that give you the right to do? The same. And then all of a sudden you do it, and then we do it, and then all of a sudden our team does it. Now we're all feeding off of each other on that, and then all of a sudden that department starts to work with us, and what do they think? What do they feel? Same thing. So it starts with one person, but one person has to do it in order to start spreading it around. This is how culture is built, person to person, interaction to interaction, heart to heart. Culture is a personal process, not an organizational process. It has social context, not necessarily organizational from a business perspective. Does that make sense? This is how culture gets shared and passed back and forth. There's a whole lot more on culture that we don't get to tap into. So what are we trying to do inside 20 square feet? We are trying to build above-the-line people. We're trying to build people who are committed and skilled to get and stay above the line. And here's what above the line means. It's very simple. To be above the line means to be intentional, on purpose, and skillful in how you think, how you decide, and how you act. To be above the line is to be intentional, on purpose, and skillful. And here's what that means. Intentional means to make a conscious choice. When I am intentional, when you are intentional, we are making conscious decisions. When we are on purpose, we have clear reasons why we're doing it. I'm on purpose. I know exactly why I'm doing this. I know the purpose. I am on purpose, on path. And to be skillful is to do it to the best of your current ability. It's not subject, or it's not objective skill, as in who is better than who. It's subjective skill. What's the best of your ability? And just think about what that request is. What are we asking people to do? We're asking them to make conscious choices for clear reasons why to the best of their ability. Is that a tall request? Is that a big ask? Just make conscious choices, clear reasons why to the best of your ability. We're not asking people to climb Everest, right? And it seems pretty easy, does it not? Just to say, hey, just do it that way. It seems better. But below the line is there as well. And below the line is when we are impulsive, when we are on autopilot, and when we are resistant. And what that means, to be impulsive is to be emotionally driven and unthinking. To be on autopilot is to be habitually driven and unthinking. And to be resistant is to be comfort-driven and unthinking. And you think about the strength of our emotional impulses. Whether it's apathy, to not move, whether it's fear, to stand still, whether it's anger, to blow up or get upset, those emotional impulses. You think about the strength of habits, the strength of autopilot, something so strong that I can literally drive a car and not remember what I was doing. And then resistance, the things we know that we need to be doing, we know would be better for us, but we just don't do them. Of those two ways, which is going to produce better results for you personally and professionally? Which produces better results, above or below the line? Above the line is going to produce better results. Which of those two is easier to engage in? Which one's more tempting? Here's interesting. Which one of those feels more natural and better? If we're honest, below the line. That's that comfort piece. That's that habit piece. It's familiar to us. So we have to recognize above the line does not always feel natural, but it produces the better results. And let me just cut right to the chase on how this works. Let me apply it to something in all of our lives that makes, and we can laugh a little bit about it. Is anybody in this room confused about how weight loss works? At all? Anybody confused about what would be good food to eat, what would be not so good food to eat? If you are, there's a book called What to Eat, What Not to Eat. I am genuinely upset I did not write it. I would have put burgers on the left and chicken on the right, and then flip it, and it'd be pizza on the left and broccoli over here, and then I'd sell it for like $10, and I would be as rich as whoever that guy that wrote that book is, I'm sure. Anybody confused about basic workout routines? Not to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just to be healthy. Anybody confused about that? So look where we are. How much money do those industries do in the United States every year? That might be a T word now. We might be past the B. It might be a T. What do we not know? Legitimately, what do we not know? We know exactly what to eat. We know exactly how weight loss works. We know exactly what to do to stay healthy. But we what? We get caught in the grip of below the line. We just get caught below the line. So let me go back to something that was said as well, and I'm just again, writing these notes down, that people are our most important asset. But Pam was talking about, she was looking at the Gallup survey, the two things. In 2015, people feel worse than ever in their jobs, and managers don't know how to make people feel valued. In 2015. I literally wrote down WTF on this piece of paper, okay? It means where's the focus? That's what it means. In 2015, where might you find information on that? Starts with G, ends with Oogle. Right? You guys are seeing my spelling habit here, right? How many leadership books are written every year? How many communication books are written every year? How many emotional books are written every year? How many mindset books are written every year? Is there anybody in this room that's confused that listening is a really important skill in life? How many exceptional listeners do you know? How many exceptional listeners and empathizers do you have in your life? Truly exceptional. So it's not just about we want to be healthy, and I get it, right? But it's not about information. We don't need to be told listening is better. We need to practice listening. We need a system for getting and staying above the line on the stuff that we already know. That's what we need. That's our fight here. And you go back into your environment, people know the strategy. People know what they need to be doing. But they sometimes they just literally don't feel like doing it. I know we want to make it more complex. It's not. Electronic medical records, nurses and physicians just don't want to do it. They just don't want to. And so it's what happens when you do a new process change. You explain the whole process, explain all the technology, put in a new CRM, right? And people just don't want to. Impulse, autopilot. This is not my routine. This is not easily solved to just say, hey, go above the line. What's the most intentional, on purpose, and skillful thing you can do with what I'm asking you to do right now? And then do you have the skills to get there? That's the question. So, and I know our time is short here, but introduce this system, the R factor. This is how we put a system in place to get and stay above the line. And that is to train people in this very simple equation on how to use it and apply it personally and professionally. Event plus response equals outcome. Life and work, we just simplify it to E plus R equals O. Right? E plus R equals O. Life and work is a constant flow of events. The outcomes we get in life and at work are not the result of the events that we experience. They are the result of how we choose to respond. And that when given the choice, I have two options. And there is a line in life. There is a line. And in every moment, we are above it or we are below it. We are going to be intentional, on purpose, and skillful in this moment, or we are going to be impulsive, on autopilot, and resistant in this moment. It is not the difference between a good person and a bad person. It is simply the difference between what those words say right there on the screen. Are we consciously, clearly, and to the best of our ability, thinking, deciding, and acting with the best that we possibly could do? Or are we allowing the feeling of what we want, the autopilot habit we have, and some desire for personal comfort and to avoid conflict to drive our behavior? Those are the choices we have to make. And the choice that we make there is going to produce drastically different outcomes. I go back to the Ohio State-Oregon game, and Ohio State players have been trained in this repeatedly by us, by the coaches, by everybody. Trained how to respond to difficult, challenging events because they were told you're not going to get great events. Like all of us, we are going to experience events in our work and in our life that are just going to be a pain in the ass. We didn't ask for them. We don't want them. They're inconvenient. The timing is awful, and we still have to choose how we're going to respond to them. They were trained for this. And I can remember back, and if you just remember back to that game, Ohio State turned the ball over 4 times, and functionally Oregon turned the ball over 0 times. It wasn't until the last play of the game when it was already out of hand. But it was 4 turnovers to 0. Just for you guys, a little analytics. The percentage chances of winning a game when you turn the ball over 4 times and your opponent turns it over 0 is less than 1%. College football. Less than 1% of teams that turn it over 4 to 0 win football games. So, Ohio State should have had a less than 1% chance of winning. Instead, they won by 20. Why? Because when all of those events happened to them, they just kept going above the line. And it didn't matter how many things happened. They just kept going above the line individually. But more important, if you look at the sideline, you watch what happened, they pulled each other above the line. And this is what happens when you get one person willing to take ownership of it, and then they build it in their department or their unit. And sports, again, are a great incubator for this. You know, sports teams have units. They have positions that come together. We have departments in our businesses. And what happens is, when I understand that I control my 20 square feet, and listen to the difference between this. I control my 20 square feet, but I'm responsible for my department. There's a difference. I don't control all the people in here, but I'm responsible for it, which means if we're not where we need to be, there's ownership on my part to be there. It's not enough just for me to own mine. I got to own mine first and then help my teammates. And if you look at Oregon, they experienced ease, but just fascinating to me, they didn't turn the ball over. They didn't have the massive turnovers, but what they did was they dropped the pass here and there. They missed a block here and there. They didn't get a first down here and there. And you watch the players, and they all went below the line. Good kids, great kids, but they went below the line. They got upset. They got mad. They got angry. They started pointing at each other. They started doing what we call BCD, blame, complain, defend. Right? Somebody dropped the ball, blame that guy for what he did, defend the fact that I did it fine, and you saw them arguing on the sidelines. And then go back, just physics. Their events weren't even as big or difficult as the ones that Ohio State had gone through. But they were responding poorly to not as challenging of events, and it ended up costing them. So here's what I'm going to declare and ask of you guys. Make your organization a no BCD zone. We'll get bumper stickers made and passed out to you guys. Or better yet, you guys, how cool would it be if you got that at home, put on your fridge, right? How many of you have kids? Okay. How awesome would it be, if I go back here, how awesome would it be if your kids came back one day and said, Mom, Dad, sit down at the kitchen table for a minute. I want to have a conversation. Because based on the events that I'm experiencing and the outcome that I'd like to produce, what response on my part do you think would be the most effective and above the line right now? How awesome would that be? Right? And after you drug tested them, you could have a really serious conversation about decision making. But is it not what we're trying to train our kids to do? What? Take ownership of your decisions. And there are what for your decisions? For every decision you make, there is a consequence. It's E plus R equals O, ladies and gentlemen. It is E plus R equals O. We don't necessarily get better at that when we get older. We get more sophisticated with our excuses. Okay? And our environment changes. It gets more complex, and it's hard. But if you think we're really good at E plus R equals O and it's very simple, just watch how people manage this equation when they drive on the road. If you think E plus R equals O is real basic, yeah, we don't control the event. I control my response. Watch how people process that when they drive. Watch how you process it when you drive. Watch how easy it is to mindlessly go below the line and scream at somebody through your plane of glass, 70 miles an hour of the road, and their plane of glass, and think you're doing something good. Because everyone going slower than you is an idiot. Everyone going faster than you is a maniac. Everybody knows you're the only safe driver on the road. That's why we brought you here for an intervention this morning. Okay? That's the point. So just think about that, right? And then here are 6 disciplines. And these, you'll get these slides, and there's a couple more, but in the interest of time, 6 disciplines for managing E plus R equals O with skill. And these are disciplines that can be taught, installed, systematically introduced for us personally into our organizations, where it becomes shared language, shared perspective, and it becomes cultural DNA of just how we do what we do every single day. Number 1 is press pause between the E and the R. Before we respond, stop and think. What is the most above-the-line thing I can do right now? Number 2 is get your mind right. The response begins internally first. My mind is the first place I go above or below the line. My behavior only flows what happens inside my mind first. To be below the line mentally and try to be above the line behaviorally, not going to work. Number 3 is step up. And this is that there is an above-the-line response in every situation. I'm going to say that again. There is an above-the-line response in every situation. Our job is to step up to that response. Not just once, not twice, every day, every time. That is elite. That is exceptional. Anybody can step up once. We all go above the line. We all do that. But consistency, that's exceptional. 4th one is adjust and adapt. As the event changes, your response has to shift and change. Basic physics. Don't get caught responding the same way when the event has changed or when the target has changed from an outcome perspective. The 5th one, make a difference. Your R is an E for other people. The R's you engage in create events for others. This is how culture gets built, by giving other people great above-the-line responses that give them an experience of the culture that we want to share together. And then the 6th discipline is to build skill. And that is that every behavior in the world is a skill. We have learned this now. Patience, discipline, empathy, resilience, emotional management, mindset. They are not innate talents that we have no control over. They are skills that we can practice and build into our organizations. And if we can build those skills, watch what happens to how we all execute and apply the technical side of our job. All right, that is all the time that I have. I really appreciate your guys' time. I'll be around here today, kind of in and out. There's a couple things I'm really looking forward to hearing today. So if there's any questions I can answer for you, please grab me, and I'll be around this evening as well. Thanks, guys.